fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 85 of the Falcoholic Live. I am, of course, your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host this evening, Mr. Evan Birchfield. You know him as the very easy to remember at Evan Birchfield on Twitter. Evan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. It's Wednesday and we've had some time to process the last game and yeah,
we've had some unfortunate time to rewatch the game. I definitely watched the condensed version for that first half at least. And it was a tough game to watch the first half, and then there were some positive things in the second half. We're going to get to all that. We're going to give you guys some injury updates. There's obviously some big news today coming out on that front. We'll talk about the Titans a bit. Another team that the Falcons probably should beat, but the question is, of course, as always, will they be able to pull that off? So we're going to open things up. I think it's smart to just get this injury stuff out of the way because I know that's what a lot of people are interested in. So unfortunately, what I talked about on the post game, my fear about it being season-ending injury for Keanu, Neal. My greatest fears have come to pass. It was indeed a Achilles tear for Neal. He will miss the remainder of the 2019 season. He was placed on IR today. In his place, the team signed safety Jamal Carter off the practice squad. Obviously, a huge loss for the defense, huge loss for the team in terms of leadership and, of course, his on-field play as well. Evan, what are your thoughts on the Falcons? Can the defense weather the loss of Neal again this year?
They weren't that very good with him, so it's kind of like they can only kind of go up, but it's definitely unfortunate to see him go down in the way it happened. And, when you see somebody that tough, some people would probably say toughest dude on our defense, crying on the field. It was rough to watch. Initially, I think a lot of us thought, or at least I did, that it was, his ACL again, and then it turned out to be an Achilles injury, which is, I believe, what knocked Rico out last year. It's just tough. And then, on top of that, getting the flag, it was stupid.
Yeah.
The refs got to have like a sort of awareness for stuff like that. Like if you tear your Achilles, you're probably going to be angry. It's not like he threw the helmet off because a play, or something went wrong. Like he threw it off because he was focused on his, torn Achilles, which makes sense. It's just unfortunate. And, I know the team brought in some people like, I believe it was TJ McDonald. Do you remember who the other guy was? TJ McDonald and Ioka.
Yeah.
Brought them in, none of them are going to replace Keanu, Neal. But it's nice to see the team thought about going outside. And then, there was who was it? Chris Cooper, who looked pretty decent this preseason, but didn't they go with somebody else?
Yep. They elevated another practice squad guy. Jamal Carter, who's kind of like a safety linebacker hybrid. He's very physical player. I tried to find some tape of him. It's kind of difficult, but it's not really a move that's gonna move the needle for anyone. I was definitely in favor of going after someone like TJ McDonald, who looked like a spot starter last year, or even better than that potentially. And this is yet another example of the Falcons trusting who they have on the roster and the practice squad. Obviously last year that backfired in a huge way because Jordan Richards was, an abomination on the football field. We haven't seen Jamal, Carter play, so it's not really fair to make any super big assumptions. But I would have liked to see them, at least bring in a veteran outside option, but they did not. There was some buzz yesterday that they were going to elevate someone off the practice squad. I assumed it would be Chris Cooper, because he had looked pretty good in the preseason, and he's versatile. He can do a lot of stuff. He's not exactly that box safety though, so the Carter move is more of them, I think, trying to give Carter a chance to prove that he's going to be able to do something in a regular season game. yes, Soler, it does seem that the team hates Sherrod Niesman still. That would be the logical player to put in there, but they would never do something like that. They're going to put Kamal Ishmael in coverage like a million times. They should treat Kamal Ishmael like he's still a linebacker. That's my opinion. Like, I know he's going to be playing strong safety sometimes, but treat him like he's a linebacker. Don't put him in any really tough coverage situations. But it's oof. Yeah, I mean, it's rough, obviously. Replacing Neal, it's not going to be possible. The defense looked really bad against the Colts, which was a reversal from how they looked against the Eagles, which was pretty good. So it's kind of still... It's basically been hard to say, are they actually good or do they suck or whatever. They're probably somewhere in between in reality, but it's not going to get any easier with Neal out of the lineup, that's for sure. But, like last year we saw Neal, Deion Jones, Grady Jarrett, and Ricardo Allen all go out in the span of like a few weeks. And even after they got Jarrett back and then, Deion Jones back later in the year, they just never could recover. I think they can weather the loss of one of those like cornerstone guys and still be okay. But, now you're kind of hanging on by a thread with your star power and your leadership. You have to be really careful there. So we're just going to hope for the best there, and then obviously hope for the best for Neal's recovery. He crushed it last time. I mean, he was back earlier than I think a lot of people thought. He was, basically there for all of training camp. He was even back for some OTA stuff. I mean, really ferocious competitor, and I think that's why it was so frustrating for him, because I think he did such a good job with his recovery. It's just one of those freak things. I mean, I don't think it's related to his previous injury as much as people want to make it like that. He was several months away from coming back, so I don't think it was like a compensatory injury or anything like that. It's just one of those freak things, and it's just sucks to see. And NFL, stop being an embarrassment with these penalties, man. You need to give people a little bit of discretion to be like, all right, that's not the spirit of the rule. We can say we're not going to enforce it here, but it's gross to do that. But that's technically the wording of the rule, so I get it. I don't blame the referees in that situation. I blame the rule makers for not giving the refs the discretion. It's just unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But we just got to move forward and hope for the best there. Who would you like to see start at strong safety now that Neal's out? If you had a choice of the guys that they have.
I mean, has KZ done enough in nickel to not be playing safety? I mean, I would prefer to see him back there given our options, since we didn't look outside. As you mentioned, I like the TJ McDonald idea, but right now, I mean, I'd probably go KZ. Do you think differently?
I honestly think he should go back to playing safety because I think he looked a lot more comfortable at safety. He's been kind of lackluster at nickel corner, and I think it's still too early to say that he's not going to be a good nickel corner. It's an adjustment to move positions like that, but we know he's really comfortable at safety. He was always a physical tackler, but can he be a physical tackler and play in the box? I don't know. I mean, he did some of that last year. He did more free stuff, but he's probably the best safety option we have on the roster. That's for sure. If they're not interested in moving KZ, I would say Niesman for sure. I think Niesman is just a solid guy. I think he'll be fine. But of course, they're probably not going to give Niesman any opportunity until every other option stinks. That's their MO with Sherrod Niesman. So it was that's their thing. I don't understand it. I can't explain it. That's just kind of what they do. But let's move on to the other big injury, which is a little bit more hopeful sounding. And by that I mean a lot more hopeful sounding because the player is not out for the season. Grady Jarrett did not practice today on Wednesday, but Quinn has said that they're trending up. Quinn said earlier in the week that he expected Jarrett to be back on Friday. So he's not necessarily expecting him to miss the game. That's good news. The other guys to monitor are the two running backs, Ito Smith and Kenyon Barner, both in the concussion protocol. Barner apparently also has some sort of knee thing. They were both held out of practice as well, so it's worth monitoring their status because Barner's the returner. Someone else I assume would probably be Justin Hardy, unfortunately. Just kind of fair catching kicks if Barner can't go. And then if Ito can't play, then we're probably going to see, if neither of them go, we'll probably see both Olsen and Hill active. which will be our first chance to get a look at them. Any of those injuries I just mentioned concern you? Any comments on those guys at this point?
No, I mean, like if Ito misses, I thought in the previous game, Devontae Freeman had did pretty solid. 16 carries. That's a lot for him, considering what he's been getting. And he had 88 yards. Like, he didn't score anything, but I kind of like the idea of him getting like a bulk of the carries. So although I want Ito to be healthy and stuff, obviously, that doesn't necessarily worry me. And then you said Grady's going to be back.
Quinn said earlier in the week that he thought Grady would probably be back by Friday. He did not practice at all today, so if he goes to limited tomorrow, I think we can probably assume that that's a good sign. But yeah, we don't know for sure. But at this point, it wasn't sounding like it was going to be a multi-week injury. If anything, it might be just a one-week thing. So.
Right. No, definitely worth monitoring, but that doesn't worry me if he came out and said that. One thing you can say about the Falcons, they're usually pretty upfront about injuries and stuff. Other teams seem to hide it, a lot more.
Yeah, a lot of people critique the Falcons hiding injuries, and it's like, well, they actually hide them a lot less than some teams.
A lot.
Like, a lot less than some
the Patriots,
teams.
The Patriots probably set the bar at hiding, injuries and stuff like that. But they're pretty. Dan Quinn's been pretty open about given like a good idea of injuries. So
he's been as forthright, maybe a little bit more forthright than average, but every NFL head coach is like a trained liar. That's like part of the job.
Oh yeah. So, you don't want to tip your hand, but
no, but you're absolutely right. They've been pretty upfront about this. I don't think they're making anything up about Jarrett. I think if they thought it was more serious, that they would have said something. He's not been declared out or anything like that early. So I think he's basically day-to-day at this point, and they're just going to continue to monitor it. I wouldn't be surprised if they let him rest tomorrow, too, and then just try to bring him back on Friday. So we'll just have to see how that goes. In terms of the rest of the injury report, Jamon Brown, full practice. He has some sort of hand thing, but he wasn't limited at all. Bosher, Calvin Ridley, Campbell, Caleb McGarry, and Tack McKinley all were limited today with various ailments, but none of that's too concerning on Wednesday, especially. I think that's about it with the injury report. I think all things considered, the Falcons are in a decent spot. They've lost 2 starters already after 3 weeks, which is not great, but it's also not as bad as the catastrophe that was last season. So I'm just gonna hold out hope here that we've seen the last of that, and the injury bug will move on and leave us alone, please. All right, let's move into this Colts game. I talked about it at great length on Sunday, so I definitely want to give you a chance, Evan, to kind of air your thoughts on it. So let's kick things off. I just want to open by saying, this was kind of like a tale of two halves, and it's honestly been the tale of 12 quarters for this team. Because we've seen 6 quarters of like catastrophically bad football. Like, this team looks like, McNeese State against Alabama out there, and then McNeese State shout out, by the way. And the other 6, it's looked like pretty good. Like, hey, this team knows what they're doing. Like, the offense is blazing. We're doing stuff. And they've kind of oscillated between those two for about half the time each way, and it's been very frustrating to watch. So what are your thoughts on like this Jekyll and Hyde situation we have going on with the Falcons right now? Do you think that's something, just you have the floor to kind of give your thoughts on where we're kind of sitting right now?
Yeah, I was on the post game with our good friend DW, and that was on Sunday evening, so it was like right after the game. So my opinion's a little different now that I've had time to simmer down, I guess you could say. The post game reaction from me was just anger, because it's like it felt like the Falcons literally wanted to lose the game, and they still almost won somehow. But now that I've had time to process it and look back at everything, we only lost by 3 points. We had 16 penalties. I think the way they played on discipline was the biggest thing that stood out. 16 penalties. I know a couple of them were ticky-tacky, especially like the Keanu Neal flag. Shouldn't have been one. but like 7 of them led to first downs for the Colts. So it's like everybody wants to bash our defense, and they were bonehead decisions. Like I think Ricardo Allen did like a helmet to helmet. It's like that kind of stuff doesn't help us at all.
Right.
But when you're giving, we're already having a hard time with Brissett and Marlon Mack and T.Y. Hilton. And they did have their own share of injuries, like Leonard being out on defense, and then T.Y. I believe left at halftime. With a quad injury or whatever. But it's like we were helping them because you give them 7 first downs, that's keeping their drive going. And then it's like you're giving away free points because they're just going to get downfield and either kick a field goal with Vinatieri or, someone's going to score. And that's pretty much what happened. And we still only lost by 3 points. And Matt Ryan did. That's why I think everybody's blaming Matt Ryan. Like that interception, he overthrew Luke Stalker by a mile, which he shouldn't be throwing. I don't think the Stalker anyways. But he overthrew him by like a mile. I think Luke Stalker climbing a ladder still would have trouble catching that ball. That was a bonehead decision. But you look on paper, it's like he finished 29 of 34, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, interception, 121.1 quarterback rating. And that looks good. Like the stats all look good. Freeman, 88 yards, 16 carries. Julio doing his thing, 8 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. But it's the penalties. Like you're not going to win games when your penalty ratio is 16-4. That's just terrible, and it reflects poorly on the coach because it is like undisciplined. So that has to be corrected. I believe 8 of them came in the first half, so it wasn't like there was a serious change or anything. That's what stood out to me the most was the penalties. You're going to have a hard time winning regardless of which team it is or who's your quarterback or whatever, or who your defense is. If you're having 16 penalties, 7 of them going for a first down, that's just a terrible ratio.
Yeah, it's that many penalties is just unacceptable. I mean, it's a ridiculous number. They were 1 away from the franchise record, and that's not a record you want to approach. Trust me.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I think the offensive line deserves credit. Last week, what they give up 1 sack last week.
Yeah. And
then I think this week they gave up, let me check real quick. I should have been more prepared. Yeah. But yeah, it was like 1 or 2. I thought they've been playing, like, I don't want to completely bash this team as like, oh, they all suck, because that'd be easy to do. But like they deserve some credit. The offensive line hasn't been completely atrocious as we probably all, thought. My biggest beef aside from the penalties was the whole, if you follow me on Twitter, my feud with this whole Luke Stalker thing, as many fans probably have.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. And he had a good PFF rating, and I posted it earlier. He had a top 5 PFF rating for the Falcons, but a lot of it came from his blocking because he's known for his blocking. But for some reason, he's getting 4 targets and Calvin Ridley only gets 1. I will never understand that, and I don't think anybody could ever justify it in my eyes. Like that, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, and that's like I went on a rant about that, on the post game. Like we should not be running anything but 11 personnel, like the majority of the time. Like we should be running 3 wide receiver sets, except for like rare situations, like the Rams. Like the Rams run 11, like 92% of snaps or something. Like I don't know what this obsession is with like, oh, we got to get our 2 tight ends set out. Let's go to 12 personnel, and then let's get our fullback on the field. Go to 21. Here we go. Like that's all fine and dandy if you don't have the best wide receiver trio in the league, and they do have the best wide receiver trio in the league. So they need to get those guys on the field on a majority of snaps at least. And to be fair, I think they do. I think they do generally have I think they run the 11 personnel more than 50% of snaps. But it's just this obsession with the 2 tight end set and getting Luke Stalker out there. 4 targets. I mean, that's just way too many targets for your second tight end on an offense. Luke Stalker should be like the 9th target.
Yeah, definitely.
Like maybe even worse than that. Like it should be Julio, Ridley, Hooper, Sanu. You could quibble about which one of those guys is 3 and 4. Freeman and the running back should probably be 5. Russell Gage 6. there's no room for Stalker to be a featured part of this offense, so we need to stop making that a thing, okay?
And I think Jaden Graham's actually a better receiving option.
Yeah.
And they're not using him at all. So, I mean, but if you look, I don't know, I'm not creating conspiracies and stuff, but he does have a history with Cutter. And Cutter does have a history of using tight ends.
Yes.
But I'd argue there's a difference between O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate compared to Austin Hooper, who's severely underrated, but Luke Stalker's your number 2 tight end. He shouldn't be getting thrown the ball.
Yeah, no, like Austin Hooper, absolutely. Like, chuck him targets. That man has become a touchdown machine now. He's good. Like, you could make him your number 4 wide receiver. You could even make him your number 3 if you want to put him ahead of Sanu. I mean, I'm not...
Definitely.
I think those two are basically, 3A and 3B in this offense. Yeah. But, like, Luke Stalker is not Cameron Brate. Like, Cameron Brate could be a starting tight end on a lot of teams in terms of his receiving and blocking ability. He just happens to be on a Bucs team that has O.J. Howard. So, yeah, if you've got 2 really good tight ends, of course you're going to use 2 tight end sets, especially before when the Bucs, when Chris Godwin was a rookie or before they had Chris Godwin as their 3rd guy, and they didn't quite have that. They had, Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson and then nobody else really at wide receiver. So it made a lot of sense to do 2 tight end sets. The Falcons don't need to do 2 tight end sets. They just don't need Stalker to be a receiver. So it's just puzzling to me that he was featured in that way. But I to be fair, Cutter did come out and say, like, all right, there's no reason Ridley should be getting 1 target in a game. Like, that's my bad. So I do appreciate, the honesty, and I don't think they went into the game planning for Luke Stalker to get 4 targets. I don't think that was the plan under any circumstance. I think Matt Ryan, like, chucked that interception ball to Stalker. That was probably not the second read on that play. That's my guess.
Yeah. Well, and that wasn't Stalker's fault.
No, it wasn't.
Ball was a mile high. Like, and he was like, even if he threw it right to him, he was probably going to get hit and drop it. So
yeah, I mean that was a no-win situation. But like, they just got to do better about getting the ball to Ridley, because he should be getting the second number of targets every game.
He went off last week.
He did. He went off the first 2 weeks. Honestly, I mean he was like the one bright spot from that Vikings game. So we just got to do a better job at spreading the ball out. As much as Matt Ryan is familiar with Cutter, this is a quote unquote new offense / coordinator change, that sort of thing. Like it has historically taken Matt Ryan a little bit of time to get settled. And I think in the second half of this game, we saw the offense start to look settled. I mean, they scored on all 3 of their second half drives. They scored touchdowns back to back to back. But they were in, a 17-point hole going into the half. So that wasn't enough to win, unfortunately. The Falcons only had 6 real possessions in this game. They had a 7th possession, but that was the one with like 10 seconds before the half that they had to take a knee on or whatever. So that one I don't really count. So they had 6 actual possessions in this whole entire game, which is a ridiculously low number of possessions. I mean, you should be getting like 8 to 9 in a game. And that's because like you said, penalties were extending drives. The Colts were doing a very ball control style offense, and the Falcons defense couldn't get off the field. And then in a game like that, losing one of those possessions to a turnover, like they did with that red zone turnover, that was just, that Stalker pick. You can't have that in a game like that. That's going to cost you the game, and that's exactly what happened. But I don't really blame the offense in this one. I know people will still be like, oh, well, Matt Ryan, he threw another pick. I think Matt Ryan's fine. Like, I'm not concerned at all about Ryan. Like, he was on fire in the second half of this game. And honestly, even towards the end of the first half, they really started to get it together. Like you said, he was like 29 of 34. His accuracy, outside of a few plays, like obviously that interception was totally airmailed. And then I think he missed on a deep throw to Julio that was unfortunate. But other than that, I mean, he was on point all night. They were just destroying the Colts. They were going up and down the field on him. It was just too little too late, and the defense, unfortunately, could not get a stop at the end of the game to give them a chance to win it. So any other points you want to touch on with the offense before we move to some defensive talk? I do see your question, Ignacio. We're going to get to that for sure. But yeah, any final offensive thoughts?
No, I think we pretty much touched on it. Nobody had any more offensive questions, I suppose.
I don't think so. I know Lil Rebel said, Jaden Graham needs to get more looks. I agree. You did mention Devontae Freeman. He had kind of like a renaissance game. Broke off a lot of big
mean,
runs.
everyone, and you mentioned it in the second half, everyone did play fairly well. And I can't remember who it was who said it. I think it was, actually, I have no idea. Someone said that, Ryan probably was going to come back and, we were going to have one of those comebacks, but the defense, we'll touch on that, but the defense, obviously didn't stop them. So
yeah, I think if Ryan had gotten the ball, they would have won that game. Like I think if the defense
had feeling, didn't it?
If they had prevented the touchdown and held the Colts to like a field goal there, I think Matt Ryan would have had a game-winning touchdown drive. Like the Colts could not stop them at all in the second half. They were just running up and down the field on him. Yep. He was like in the zone. I think he could, had a legitimate chance to pull it off. But
it felt like I swore it was headed towards Matt Bryant field goal overtime, that sort of thing. But
at minimum, yeah. And it's just unfortunate, the defense couldn't get a stop.
Yeah,
and they almost did get a stop like 3 times, and the penalties.
Yeah, and then that Doyle thing that ended the game was just crushing. It went for actually I have no idea. It went for like 16 yards or something.
It was the same play they got fooled on like 3 times. Yeah. But,
it was like a play action, I think, or something like that, and he like bootlegged it out to him or whatever. But it's just, that was heartbreaking because it did have, as you mentioned, it had that feel of a comeback, but wasn't meant to be.
Nope, wasn't meant to be, and that definitely is a good segue into the defensive struggles in this game, which kind of persisted all throughout the game. The offense putting the team in a big hole early with that interception. That obviously didn't help things, but the defense played pretty poorly all game. This is not an electric passing offense. At a certain point, the Colts were down, T.Y. Hilton, so you really need to be getting stops at that point. They could not. They didn't get blown off the field by Marlon Mack, but it wasn't good. It was just kind of a disappointing overall performance by the unit after we had been pretty encouraged by what we saw early in the season. We saw a lot of just like schematic blunders. Like the game planning for this looked totally inept. Like they didn't nail it at all. Brissett was 16 of 16 at one point, just hitting these underneath throws every single play. Like the Falcons refused to adjust to those throughout the whole game. They got burned by the same bootleg rollout play like 3 or 4 times. We saw I tweeted a picture of it. It was a 2nd and 1 with the Falcons like backed up almost to their end zone, and Oliver's playing like 5 yards off of T.Y. Hilton on 2nd and 1, and it's like, okay, so why are we giving a 5-yard cushion when we're backed up to our end zone and it's 2nd and 1? Like there's literally no possible defense for that because you give a huge cushion if you're afraid of getting burned deep. You can't get burned deep if you're backed up to your end zone. Like you can't. There's no room. There's nowhere to run. Like there's no space there. And it's that wasn't the only play. That was just the most memorable one. We also I've talked about the refusal, it seems, for Quinn to move Trufant around to cover teams' top guys or the guys that aren't good matchups for Oliver, and teams are just really making Oliver look bad because they're getting him mismatched on these fast small wide receivers, which has never been his game to cover. And it's been concerning to me that we haven't seen any adjustment there by Quinn. So I'll now open the floor to you since I've talked for like 5 minutes now.
You're hitting all good points. And it does suck for Oliver because it's like, you could make an argument he was one of the saviors last week on Sunday Night Football. Surely making, pretty much ending the game, tackling Zach Ertz, and then this game, with what you put on Twitter, it's just stuff you don't want to see. But I think what's getting lost in this too is, shout out to the Colts. Like they played good football. They didn't make mistakes. T.Y. Hilton left at halftime, but that dude, balled out and he had an injury and was, it wasn't even a sure thing he was going to play. Jacoby Brissett, as you mentioned, had a good game. This dude wasn't even supposed to be a starter until a week before the season when Andrew Luck retired. And then Marlon Mack's always underrated. Like they're a good team. No offense to them. Yeah. I don't want it to seem like, there's this narrative that we should have destroyed them because they suck or something. Like they're 2-1 for a reason. Good for them. But these are the type of games where, I fear we're going to look back and be like, why didn't we beat the Colts? Like we could, I hate those scenarios, and the Falcons always get themselves in it where it's like, oh, we're a game behind, or we're tied. If we only had one more W, and it's like, oh, remember that Colts game where we had 16 penalties and lost by 3 to Jacoby Brissett? It's like, it just kind of sucks. But I mean, the one play that, aside from the ones you mentioned, that stuck out to me was, just the trouble with the receiving backs. Naheem Hines, I believe it was, who it was like towards the red zone. He caught a pass and basically juked Foye Oluokun and got a first down. I think that was right before Keanu Neal got injured, actually. But it's just kind of like those plays where it's like we felt like we were stopping them, and then we just give up a big play or something. Gotta do better on that, and I'm sure they'll try and correct it. But I mean, but you summed it up pretty perfectly about the defense. Just some defensive penalties. I know my boy Jack Crawford. If I'm going to praise him, I gotta be critical when times are bad. And he had a couple like encroachment penalties. I think 2. Which didn't help at all. No. But
I thought one of them he didn't technically get into the neutral zone, but.
Yeah, but I mean, we saw how they were calling it. And I don't want to be like the refs were one-sided, but I mean, 16-4 is a pretty eyebrow-raising ratio there. Like, you're telling me the Colts only committed 4 penalties throughout that entire game, and we did 16. I don't think so. But but when you can't always blame the refs. If the refs are focusing on us like that, you got to play more disciplined, and we didn't. So, yeah.
Yep.
I'm just this game is just kind of frustrating because I think we all got that false sense of security, and I mentioned it on the last time I was on your show. It's like I kind of mentioned how I hope this isn't a false sense of security, that we're going to be confident in our team going forward because we looked good. Everybody looked good. The defense looked good. The offensive line looked good against the Eagles, and that's basically what happened. So. We got the Titans coming up, and I'm sure we'll touch on that, but it's just like you hope you can bounce back. Unfortunately, we are getting another tough opponent. Derrick Henry's going to be fun to watch us try and stop. But
I mean, the thing to me is like this defense is so predicated on tackling well, and if they tackle well, it works. Like the scheme works if you can rally the ball and tackle, and if you miss tackles all over the place, you're gonna look terrible. And that's exactly what happened against the Colts. Like missing tackles left and right, not disciplined, not being in the right place, and it looks embarrassing. It looks bad, like bad football on defense. And it's puzzling that they'll tackle really well one game and then tackle really poorly the next. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But there's just some schematic things that like Quinn just has to be better at. Like you have to play modern football. You have to be willing to move your corners around to get them the most favorable matchups. Because if you don't, your opponent's going to. I guarantee it. Like these coaches are smart nowadays. Everyone's not going to be like, all right, well, we're going to line up our 3 guys, and you line up your 3 guys, and we're just going to go at each other. Like smart offensive coordinators are going to try to get their guys mismatched. Like that's what we saw when Shanahan was here. He would do some kind of magic with the formation. He'd watch the other team and be like, all right, if I move the fullback here, he's going to take up their corner. Like their number 1 corner is now going to be on our fullback, which is going to leave Julio in the slot against a linebacker or something like that. We'd see that stuff regularly. And if you play, like I don't know how I would describe it. Like I guess stubborn coverage, I guess is a way I would phrase it. Like if you're like, these are the rules of our coverage. If you're lining up on this side and you're lining up on this side, and whoever's over here, you're gonna get that guy, and not being like, all right, Trufant. Whenever T.Y. Hilton's on the field, you're gonna follow him around. Like we're not gonna let him match up on us. Oliver, you're gonna be on. A great example would have been like Alshon Jeffrey if he was able to play in that game more than like a couple snaps. Like Oliver, you're gonna follow Jeffrey around. You're gonna match up on him and make sure that he doesn't go off, because you match up well against him. And
it's like backyard football.
Yeah,
that's what you do.
But that's
like I'm covering that guy.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's where modern football's going. Like this is a matchup league. I don't know why you draft a guy like Oliver, who's a big receiver specialist, a press guy, a physical corner, and then you're going to have him play sides, and you're going to let the opposing team's offense just be like, all right, well, your big corners over here. All right, well, we're just going to throw our little tiny slot receiver who's just going to juke him out of his shorts every play over here and just embarrass your defense. Like, you don't have to do that.
I think it's a bad look, too, because it's like, the big thing this offseason was Dan Quinn's taking back over the reins on, he has nobody to blame,
right.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of like he was using it as like a scapegoat. I don't want to say that because, but I mean, technically he was. When you fire a defensive coordinator and then you take over, you're basically saying I can do a better job, and I don't think we've seen that.
Yeah.
Because, last year we were without, as you mentioned before, we were without everyone. Now, I mean, we're without Keanu and Neal, but it's like up to that point, it wasn't like the defense was superior to everyone they've matched up against. Haven't seen anything that's like groundbreaking or whatever. They've been okay, at times, and they've been really bad at times. So I think that's a bad look going forward, and the defense is going to have to step up, because it's fair to say, there's a hot seat. He's on it, or at least, standing by it. So
yeah.
And when you take on those responsibilities like that, you're going to get the praise. If the defense looked amazing, he's going to get the praise. If they look like shit, you're going to get bashed.
Exactly. So there's nowhere else to point the finger. All the other coordinators got fired. He brought in new guys, and it's been basically the same show. Penalty prone. We have a new special teams coordinator, and the special teams is still constantly committing penalties. The new offensive coordinator. I mean, I think Dirk Cutter's probably an upgrade over Sark. I think that's probably the good hire over the three. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see if Quinn ends up being a better defensive coordinator than Marquand Manuel, who had a very good 2017 season to his record, and then the team just didn't. The team was catastrophically injured last year. Like, I don't know how much we can really learn from last season, but I know Vlad's asking about how many games does Quinn have to win to avoid getting fired? And I mean, I like I said in the chat, like I think it's 10-6. Like I think they need to get to 10 wins. I think
it's playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's playoffs. But if they go 10-6 and miss the playoffs to 10-6, like I don't think they're gonna fire him for that.
Well, that's definitely a fluke. Like you can't help that. But I mean, if they somehow got in at 8-8, I think he's still safe.
Yeah. Like I think if he's 10-6 and they miss the playoffs, he's probably okay. Yeah. But like,
I mean, 10-6, we can pray for 10-6. Like, if we win 10-6 and still miss the playoffs, like
that's free.
Well, we tried.
That's very weird.
Like, we did good. But yeah, I would agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he survives if it's like a really encouraging 9-7 or something. But like.
Or if we ran the table, like we lose a couple more going, and then out of the bye week we run the division, but we,
it's just not quite good
8,
enough.
9, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Like
But yeah, I mean, I don't think 8-8 is gonna be good enough. I think he needs to have a winning season at minimum, and probably 10-6 to be like totally safe. But yeah, I mean, people are saying like, how bad does it have to be to like fire him mid-season? He probably has to lose all the games going into the bye for him to get canned mid-season. I mean, probably.
Yeah, we lose to Arizona, and.
Honestly,
who else do we have? We got Tennessee, Houston, Arizona, St. Louis, Los Angeles, and
Seattle.
Seattle.
Yeah. Like I mean, I think like this Titans game is a game they have to win. Like this Titans team has a good defense, but this offense has been totally stuck in the mud. They're not good. Like Mariota has been bad. So if they get lit up by this Titans offense, like Derrick Henry's going to get his. He's a good running back. They have a solid run blocking offensive line, but that offensive line cannot pass block. They don't have Taylor Lewan. They gave up like 9 sacks last week. That is an offense that you should be able to keep in check. Their defense is like good, but the offense should be able to do enough to get a win pretty comfortably here, we would think. So if he loses to the Titans here, like if they lose the rest of these games going into the bye, he's probably getting fired at the bye. Like, I don't think there's any way around that. If they're that bad, I think at that point we're all basically like demanding his firing, and they basically have like 3 ex-head coaches on the roster on the team, so they definitely have interim guys ready to go, unlike last year. So we'll see. Yeah. But yeah, I mean it's it would be really embarrassing if they, went into the bye losing all their remaining games with the offense playing as good as it was last week. They should at least be able to like claw their way to 500, I would think, even against some of these good teams. I mean, we saw the Seahawks get embarrassed by Teddy Bridgewater, giving up a punt return touchdown and a fumble recovery touchdown to the Saints. So maybe the Seahawks are a little more beatable than we thought, but it's tough. It's tough to predict. But yeah, I mean, it's just for Quinn taking over the defense and like really trying to put his stamp on it, and like all this talk. We've seen some good defensive performances so far, but this last game was like shades of the past. Like not bad tackling, penalties, really puzzling coverage decisions. Like game planning was not adequate. And this has been a trend against the AFC. I mean, I know I botched this statistic live on the air, but they're 3-11 against the AFC since 2016. Only won 3 AFC games that whole time. 1-8 since 2017. So it's bad. Like it seems to me like they treat these AFC games like a week off. I mean, the game planning is not up to snuff. The team doesn't seem to get up to play these guys. Like you can't take any weeks off in the NFL. Like every single win could be the one that keeps you out of the playoffs. So, do you have any thoughts on this seeming ineptitude against the AFC? Is that a systematic thing, a coaching thing, or is it just like a weird statistic?
I think it's just a weird, kind of like how we had we finished with 12 straight preseason losses. Just kind of a coincidence, weird. But I mean, hopefully, we got to beat the Titans. If we lose the Titans, I think, I don't want to say Quinn will get fired, but people are going to be rioting. The fans, if they aren't already.
Yeah, well, don't worry, we're going to be whipping you guys into a frenzy, so.
Yeah, we're not going to hold you back. Y'all are, whatever. Because I can understand it. It is frustrating, and I like Dan Quinn. He seems like a very good motivational leader and stuff like that, but it's just like if the job's not getting done, it's not getting done. You hate to see Matt Ryan and Julio's careers pretty much being wasted if, this continues down this road of 500 at best or whatever. It sucks. But we got the Titans. I believe then we have the Texans, which, we lose the Texans. I can understand that because they're a good team. The Titans, not so much. I think we should win that. We should win the Cardinals game. If we lose one of the Seahawks-Rams games, probably the Rams. Yeah, I understand that.
That's acceptable.
Yeah, you got to kind of understand where our team is right now, and hopefully the bye week helps them because then we have 4 straight divisional games or something like that.
Yeah.
And then those games are really what matters. You lose in the AFC, I believe it doesn't affect tiebreakers and stuff like that. So it's a loss, but it's not like the end of the world. And we're all Falcons fans here. We know this team does this where they lose games that don't make any sense. Yeah. We lose to the Dolphins every time we play them in the regular season for some reason.
Yep.
It's just, and you can't help that stuff, but it does come back to bite them usually, and hopefully this Colts game won't. But they I mean, our whole staff predicted the Falcons to win. Everybody was confident.
Yeah.
Even though we were I believe the underdogs.
We were.
Nationally.
We were the underdogs in the game.
And apparently we're all fanboys or whatever because we were all in on it. But I honestly didn't see them losing. I could see it being close, but
yeah,
but definitely against the Titans. I mean, would you agree that we should be able to handle the Titans? And it's at home, and we're in our throwbacks. Not that really makes a big difference, but
the black uniforms make everyone play better.
Yeah, I mean, they make at least we're going to lose looking good.
Yeah, exactly.
If it comes to it. But is it possible? I mentioned on Twitter. Let me find that stat. I'll let you talk for a minute because I gotta find it.
Yeah, I mean it would be surprising if they were to lose to the Titans. I mean that would be a pretty bad result. They need to get this win. They need to get back to 500, going into a very tough game against the Texans. That is not an easy opponent by any measure. And then after that it's the Cardinals, which is another game that you need to win. to start stacking some wins here.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, maybe we look back and this game doesn't matter. Like if they can manage to win, the Cardinals game and this Titans game, and then if they lose to the Texans and they lose to the Rams, so they get back to 500 with a win against the Seahawks, so we're at 4-4 going into week 8, or into the bye or whatever it is, and I think that's fine. I think if you can be 4-4, you're fine. Like you have to play your best football to close out the season, but this is a team that has had a habit of finishing strong, so I think that's okay. Like we just can't be like 2-6, and it's time. Like okay, now we have to win every single remaining game, or we're gonna miss the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Like that's not a recipe for success for any team, unless you're like the Chiefs that one year they were 1-4 and they ended up finishing like 10-6. So
yeah.
You can't depend on that.
I found that.
Oh, go ahead.
I found that stat. I just wanted to mention it because I found it interesting. I mean, we are only 3 games in, so it's probably not like earth-shattering. But on the road, obviously Indianapolis and Minnesota, we are a combined 3. We have scored 3 points, and our opposition have scored 41 points entering halftime. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're just not a good road team.
Maybe.
I mean, they were both domes, so it's like you would hope. That we would be used to it, but it's possible we just suck on the road. I mean, we look good at home. If we come out and look good this weekend, it's going to be even more like maybe we just aren't good on a good away team, right? Which unfortunately half your games are. So you kind of need to be winning
at least
something
like
on the road.
500 on the road, yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But I mean, that's eye opening because it's like 3 to 41. Like you're getting whooped in the first half.
Yeah.
And we can't rely on coming back, as you mentioned. We did come back in the second half, even though we fell short. But that's just terrible. 3 compared to 41 points. You're allowing too many points first off, and then you're not even scoring anything. And I believe the 3 came from.
It was a field goal.
Was it the? Yeah, I mean, but was it in the first game or second game? I can't remember.
No, it was the second game because it was 20. It was 21-0 going into the half in Minnesota, I think. So
okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then it was 13-3 and then 20-3 right before halftime because the Falcons bungled the end of the half, I believe. So it's been rough the first half of these road games. Like you just can't get into these giant holes. Like it's never going to work out,
especially on the road.
Yeah. Like it's bad. Like it's bad football. Like if the Falcons had kept it, like if they had gone into halftime down 13-3, hadn't given up that last score like right before the half, probably would have won this game. There's no guarantees obviously, but I think they would have been in a much better position at the end of the game where they're, maybe they're kicking the field goal to win at the end as opposed to kicking the field goal just to get back to tie. Or it's the Colts are going down the field to try to kick that final drive by the Colts. They have to kick the field goal. They can't run the clock out. They have to kick the field goal to make it overtime. But it's just how those little mistakes they add up, and then you get down to the end of the game and you're out of time. And that's exactly what happened. So it was a bad game. We've had, like I said, 6 quarters of pretty good football and 6 quarters of pretty bad football. So. Yeah. I really don't know what this team is yet. This is a Titans team that they need to beat. They're not like abysmal. This isn't like the Dolphins we're talking about or anything, but this is a beatable team. It's at home. There's no excuses. You need to win this game. You need to get back to 500 because you got some tough games coming up, and you've given up your gimme loss. Like that was this Colts game. Now there's no more of those.
One of the people in the chat. Salaire, I'm probably going to butcher this. Salaire, yeah, Salaire mentioned that Adam Vinatieri's first field goal hit the goalpost.
Yep.
Totally forgot about that. Yeah, if he misses that, he said even we would have gone to overtime. That's right.
Yep.
But I mean,
yeah,
that's crazy. That's bad luck. Yeah,
it bounced in, so it's hey, that happens sometimes. You need to not be in the situation where you need a field goal to be missed, to win the game. We can't play the Bucs every week, okay, where they're just missing field goals.
Yeah. Just so I don't forget to mention it, Matt Ryan leading the league in interceptions. Who saw that coming?
Right. Leading the league in interceptions, also has more touchdowns than interceptions, though, by a lot. I think this game he added
He's throwing the ball a lot more. I mean,
Yeah, I like that. Like the second half of this game is what we want to see. Like if he plays like that in every game, like this
yeah,
defense can be terrible and they'll probably still win a lot of games. So
yeah.
I don't want to depend on that necessarily, but
Yeah, I mean, you got to run the ball eventually, but I mean, until last week, I'd argue we haven't really had a decent run game.
yeah,
I remember they used to do that with Freeman. It seemed like they would give Freeman and Coleman split carries, and they refused to obviously let one
yeah,
run everything unless there was an injury. But they actually had better stats when they got more of a share. So like that's why, like as I mentioned earlier, I kind of like the idea of Freeman getting a lot more carries because he's going to finish with higher, I think, better stats. But that's just me.
yeah. X Ryan. So X Ryan has heard some people in the media saying our defense is too simplistic and is figured out. Easy for QBs to find openings since it doesn't change much. I mean, Ryan, like this is a defense that a lot of NFL teams run. Like obviously Seattle and Atlanta are the two that are like most well known for it, but there's nothing really special about it. Like it's a cover 3, 4-3 under. Like they play cover 3 on the back end a lot, and they're gonna generally be a 4-3 up front with some 3-4 looks mixed in. But modern NFL defenses mean that you switch it up. Like you're not gonna play cover 3 every snap, and you shouldn't. Like if you see a bunch formation, like that's a snap that you're gonna play your zone against. If you see an overload looking play or some sales concepts or all this stuff that's designed to overload your zones, you need to be able to check into some man or cover 1 or something like that. You need to be able to play multiple coverages because if you just play zone or you just play man, you're going to get, blown up by these plays that are targeted to go after specific schemes. And I will definitely say that in this last game, they played almost entirely zone and it was not a good idea. The Colts went into this game clearly planning to just throw underneath and just have their athletes try to make plays, and it worked almost the whole game. I mean, the Falcons didn't adjust to it at all. They didn't play any zone. They kept giving them huge cushions. I mean, it was puzzling for a lot of reasons because it was like they were giving them these big cushions, so it was like they were simultaneously like respecting these like kind of jag receivers like Zach Pascal and other people, and also like giving them way too much respect because they were like terrified to press them or something. Like it was like both at the same time. It was very weird. But I don't think the scheme is necessarily like the scheme is too simple. It's just that you can't just run cover 3 every play and expect that to work against smart offensive coordinators like Frank Reich. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well, Evan.
No, I mean you pretty much summed it up. I'm just I'm ready for the next game.
Yeah.
I want to see the team bounce back because I honestly feel like they have way too much talent to be what we saw last week and what we saw against Minnesota. Like I understood, I know I picked them in the staff picks or whatever. I picked the Falcons to beat the Vikings, but I understood that loss because that is a very underrated environment. The Vikings stadium, and it's week 1. You don't know what's on both sides. You don't know what to think, what to predict.
Right.
And I understood that loss. And then week 2 they bounced back, and I was like, okay, this will be, and then it's like week 3 they fell back into a hole. So it's like you want to believe something good's going to happen, but I have honestly no idea. I just kind of want them to go out and be the Falcons that played the Eagles, maybe even better.
Yeah, hopefully better
against the Titans. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
hopefully better. I mean, I don't want to get too greedy, but like you can't depend on Aguilar, dropping balls all the time,
Because if we do lose, it's going to be the season already seems like it's long, and we're only entering week 4. But it seems like it's going to be a longer season if we somehow lose that game.
Oh yeah. No, if they lose that game, like then you're going on the road in a must-win game against the Texans, or else you're going to be 1-4. I mean, that's not a situation that has a lot of good outcomes for you as a team. Yeah. So don't do that. Like if you're 2-2 going into that Texans game, it's like, all right, we can claw our way back from that loss if it happens. But this is a game that they need to win. It's against an offensive line that they can really take advantage of. Like they didn't get a ton of pressure against the Colts, but the Colts have arguably the best line in the NFL. So that's not entirely surprising. They struggled. They couldn't get pressure. Where they looked the best against the Eagles was when they were getting pressure on Wentz constantly, and I think that's that could be a key to this Titans game is can they get pressure on Mariota? Can they create penetration? Can they get to Henry before he gets that head of steam? Because once Henry gets going, man, I mean, he is a I mean, if it was me out there, I'd make a business decision to get the hell out of the way. I'll tell you that right now. So definitely. It's Henry is obviously good. He's going to get his yards. He's going to get his touchdowns.
We just don't need him to run wild over us.
Yeah,
if we force Mariota to beat us, I think that's the way you win. If Mariota beats you, you can't do anything about it. But force him to be the reason we lose, and I think the Falcons will be okay.
Yeah. We need to be seeing.
One person mentioned.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just let me find it. Vlad mentioned. Not that we're really entertaining the idea, but who would you want to replace Dan Quinn if he was? Say we lose, they go in the, this offseason. Who would you want to replace him? Or do you even have anybody?
I mean, I do like the idea of Lincoln Riley because I think they need to go get an offensive coach. And I think the talent of this team, could potentially be enough to convince a lot of people to play, like to come out and coach that weren't really considering it. I think an offensive-minded head coach is where they need to go. They've tried 2 defensive guys now. They've squandered Matt Ryan's career. So I think they need to go for an offensive guy. Obviously, if Kyle Shanahan were to shake loose in San Francisco, I don't think that's going to happen under any circumstances at this point.
Wouldn't that be nice, though?
But if they had floundered again this year and he'd gotten fired, he would have been our head coach so fast. Like Blank would have personally driven over there and given him the job. Yeah. I do think if Vic Fangio is like a one and done in Denver, I want him to be our DC. Maybe he can't be a head coach, but Fangio is a tremendous defensive coordinator, and I would be all over him coming here to be the defensive coordinator if he gets one done in Denver, but not the head coach. He looks like he's maybe a little bit over his head there, but like Lincoln Riley.
One name I want to.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, one name I want to throw out because Lil Rebel mentioned Dallas's OC Kellen Moore. We're only 3 weeks in, but that Dallas offense has pretty much got the same pieces as they've had before, and they look night and day better. The way Dak's out there using his weapons. Amari Cooper's been looking dominant. That's definitely one to monitor this season. I'm not saying give him, he's super young.
That would be very bold.
In the league.
Yeah.
I think one thing we can all agree, or at least I hope we can agree, is we need an offensive coach, because going after these defensive coaches like Mike Smith and Dan Quinn, we get them because we expect we're going to have a good defense, and we don't. We still rely on our offense. So if we're going to have a great offense and like a subpar defense, might as well have an offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan or Kellen Moore or whatever. Like, I'm just kind of tired of these like defensive-minded head coaches because they're not making our defense better.
Yeah, and the thing about if we get an offensive head coach in here, we can stop the endless offensive coordinator shuffling that goes on. Yeah. Like, we don't have to worry about our head coach getting poached to go coach another team because he's the head coach. Like if we had hired Shanahan in 2015 to be our head coach instead of our offensive coordinator, I mean, I wonder where we would have been. Obviously, Shanahan cost us the Super Bowl, so I'm not like gonna let him off the hook for that necessarily, but I'm curious as to if we kept the continuity. Say we get to that Super Bowl, everything basically happens the same way, but Dan Quinn's the defensive coordinator instead of the head coach, and let's say Quinn gets poached, to be the defensive coordinator or the head coach of San Francisco, and we have Shanahan still. I wonder what the trajectory of this team would have been. It's an interesting question, obviously impossible to tell for sure, but I think that maybe the trajectory would have been more consistent because the offense would have stayed elite. But, it's hard to say. But the other point I want to make is defensive head coaches outside of like Bill Belichick just do not have a good track record as head coaches. Like, generally the offensive head coaches are more successful, and they have been the vast majority of the time. You look around the league, outside of Bill Belichick, who's, a tremendous defensive mind, there's really not a lot of, like, maybe Pete Carroll is the one other guy that you really point your finger at. But, like, we talk about the most consistent coaches, the guys that are having their teams competing every year, and it's, guys like, Sean Payton in New Orleans, as much as we like to malign him, offensive head coach, there's a lot of those names, Andy Reid, Bruce Arians for a while with the Cardinals. Frank Reich with the Colts now. I thought he devised a very good game plan. Like, the offensive coaches generally have more success at the head coach level. But
like McVay.
Yeah, McVay. Same thing.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that we should learn our lesson here and go after an offensive coach, like you said. Like it's time to stop the endless shuffling on offense and give Matt Ryan a consistent offensive coach that he's going to be with for the rest of his prime.
We've had the offensive coaches, like Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, who's the Packers coach now, was the Falcons quarterback coach.
He was like the QB's coach and some other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we haven't had the offensive coaches. It's just we
can't hold on to them.
Yeah, we can't. And then when we, could get them, it's like we're not. We're going the defensive route. I understand the logic of it, wanting a good defense, but it just doesn't really work.
But you can get a good defense with a good defensive coordinator. I mean, look at Vic Fangio, for example. Everywhere he goes, he seems to turn around a defense, So, hey, my wet dream would be like, obviously Shanahan if he shook free, but like, let's say like Lincoln Riley or maybe even Kellen Moore. We'll see if they keep it up all season. That could be a super bold option to go for.
Yeah. I'm not saying right now.
Yeah.
Like down the road, if they continue this trend.
Yeah, and like, if Fangio gets one and done there, bring him in to coach this defense. I mean, I think like Lincoln Riley or Kellen Moore as a head coach with an experienced guy like Fangio at defensive coordinator, I think that's a very exciting combo, in my opinion. So we'll see. Obviously, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. It's it's an interesting year because I wouldn't say there's like right now it's still really early. There's not a lot of like hot names in the coaching community, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And hopefully this will all be for naught because we'll be in the playoffs and the week 3 loss to the Colts will be but a distant memory. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see there. All right. Well, before we get out of here, guys, I do want to remind you that if you don't mind to throw a like and a subscribe our way. If you guys are enjoying the content, we do appreciate those. They do help out the channel. Thank you so much for your contributions and your chat. Chat's been super lively tonight. I know there's been some back and forth between some chatters. I appreciate you guys staying, relatively civil. That's cool. But yeah, Evan. He's on Twitter at Evan Birchfield. Like I said, easy to remember. Anything that you're working on that you'd like to plug?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, the Falcons are wearing their black throwbacks. I don't know what their official name for it is. It's like the 66 ones, but with obviously a black helmet. So yeah, I'm doing a brief history review of that. I'm not sure which day it'll drop on the Falcoholic.com, but it'll be on there before the game. Also, I do a fantasy article every Friday. So if you have any questions, I do like a mailbag at the end if there's any questions. Last week, I basically mentioned, Freeman would have his first good game of the season, and he did compared to the first 2 games. So, hopefully, my goal is to, if anything, help you get a fantasy win in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be Falcons specific. If you have anything NFL, ask away. But you can ask me and find me on Twitter at Evan Birchfield. Then also for the mailbag, you can email me, the Falcoholic Evan at yahoo.com. But I appreciate you having me on again. And I think Adnan comes back in 2 weeks. He'll be
something
back
like
to
that,
regular.
Yeah, but then maybe we'll have a threesome. Yeah, we'll have a threesome.
What?
We'll have a threesome at some point.
Yeah. Threaten me with a good time.
Exactly.
I'll be back, and I appreciate all the people commenting. I've been trying to make it a thing more to, because the first time I did the show, I didn't even know there was a chat. So. Now that I know there's one, it's like if you see me staring at my phone, it's because I'm reading all your questions or whatever you're saying. I appreciate everybody who's listening and stuff, and hopefully next week, next time I'm on, me and Kevin will have something positive to talk about how we destroyed the Titans. But if not, we'll still be here talking about Doomsday or whatever. So.
exactly. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on again, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you filling in, and you'll be a regular fixture if you want to going forward. So we'll get some we'll get some trios in here. We'll have some.
I mean, if
times.
The people in the chat will have me,
the chat has adopted you. We're fine.
I'll let them. They're like,
they can do we can do a gladiator type situation. But yeah, guys, definitely check that out. And then shout out to me, currently leading the Falcoholics picks.
That is right.
By one. So. Believe I'm first. I think the venerable Dave Cho is maybe second. So
our poor James has almost got more losses than wins somehow.
Wow. Hey, go big or go home. That's probably his strategy. But
he's
especially
trying.
when you're down, you got to start
Yeah.
going for him. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's always fun. So check out our picks, everybody, and then I will have my usual fare. The stats preview tomorrow, and then players to watch on Friday. Second part of that Mortensen interview is going to be coming out this weekend. We're going to talk some Falcons stuff, some of his favorite Falcons players, and some funny stories from his times with the Falcons. There are some good ones in there. There's some funny ones, and he was, really fun to talk to there. So look for that second part this weekend. But otherwise, guys, I am on Twitter at Falcoholic Kevin. The show is at Falcoholic Live. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, if you don't mind, throw us a like and a subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, and definitely check out that wonderful website, thefalcoholic.com, for all your Falcons content related needs. Until next time, guys, we will be back Sunday after the game to break things down. Hopefully, be a little bit more fun conversation. I know you guys are probably more likely to tune in if it's like me ranting. So either way, I'll see you guys on Sunday for that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy football Thursday night, or at least attempt to. Until then, guys, I'm Kevin. He's Evan, and we will see you on Sunday. Have a good night.